probably the most amazing part of that was that there were a few moments during this time period that we're trying to resuscitate him. There were a few moments where we got some heartbeat back.
For 45 years, Dr. George Nicopolis carried a secret that ate away at his soul. The man who was there when Elvis Presley took his final breath. The physician who desperately tried to save the king of rock and roll had been forced into silence by threats, legal pressure, and a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of the entertainment industry. But now, at 95 years old and facing his own mortality, Dr. Nick has finally broken that silence. And what he's revealed will shatter everything you thought you knew about August 16th, 1977. "They made me lie," Dr. Nick said in his final recorded interview, his voice trembling with decades of suppressed guilt. Elvis didn't die the way they told the world. What happened in that bathroom at Graceland was far worse than anyone imagined, and I was ordered to keep my mouth shut or face complete destruction. The official story painted Elvis's death as a tragic but predictable end to a life of excess. Heart failure brought on by prescription drug abuse. Case closed. But Dr. Nick's revelation exposes a medical emergency so shocking, so preventable, that powerful forces conspired to bury the truth rather than face the consequences. "I watched Elvis suffer for the last 3 hours of his life," Dr. Nick confessed. "He was conscious. He was trying to tell me something. But by the time I realized what was really happening to his body, it was too late. And then they made me sign papers saying I would never reveal what I witnessed." The pressure to stay silent didn't come from just one source. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, reportedly threatened Dr. Nick's medical license if he ever spoke publicly about the true cause of death. The Presley family, devastated by grief and terrified of scandal, demanded complete confidentiality. Even the Memphis authorities, eager to avoid a media circus, allegedly pressured the doctor to stick to the official narrative. For decades, Dr. Nick carried the weight of knowing that Elvis's death could have been prevented. Not through better drug management or lifestyle changes, but through proper medical intervention for a condition that was killing him slowly and painfully for years. "Every time I saw his face on a magazine cover or heard his music on the radio, I felt sick," Dr. Nick admitted. "Because I knew the truth. I knew what really happened in those final moments, and I knew that if I had acted differently, if I had been braver, Elvis might still be alive today." The breaking point came when Dr. Nick realized he didn't have much time left. Facing his own mortality, the guilt became unbearable. He couldn't take the secret to his grave, knowing that Elvis's family, his fans, and the world deserved to know what really happened to their beloved king. But why did it take so long? Why endure 45 years of silence when the truth could have honored Elvis's memory and prevented other similar tragedies? "They destroyed my career anyway," Dr. Nick said, his voice breaking. "I lost my medical license, my reputation, everything I'd worked for. But I still kept their secret because I thought I was protecting Elvis's legacy. Now I realize I was protecting the people who failed him." The legal threats were real and devastating. Dr. Nick was told that speaking out would result in lawsuits that would bankrupt him and his family. He was warned that his medical records could be scrutinized, his prescribing practices questioned, and his entire career destroyed. The fear of professional and financial ruin kept him silent, even as the guilt consumed him. "I became a scapegoat for their failures," he revealed. "They needed someone to blame for Elvis's death, and I was the easy target. But the real culprits, the ones who could have saved him, they walked away clean." As Dr. Nick's health began to fail, he made a decision that would change everything. He would tell the truth about Elvis's final hours, no matter the consequences. He would reveal the medical emergency that the world never knew about, the desperate attempts to save a dying man, and the cover-up that followed. What he's about to reveal will expose not just how Elvis really died, but why his death was allowed to happen, and who was really responsible for one of music's greatest tragedies. The truth Dr. Nick revealed wasn't just about medical negligence. It was about a coordinated cover-up that began within hours of Elvis's death and involved some of the most powerful people in the entertainment industry. Colonel Parker was in my face before Elvis's body was even cold, Dr. Nick recalled. He grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Doc, you keep your mouth shut about what really happened here, or I'll make sure you never practice medicine again." This wasn't a request, it was a threat. What really happened wasn't a simple heart attack or drug overdose. According to Dr. Nick's explosive revelation, Elvis died from a catastrophic bowel obstruction that had been building for weeks. The megacolon condition that plagued him for years had reached a critical point, but instead of seeking proper medical intervention, those around Elvis chose to manage his symptoms with increasingly dangerous medications. Elvis was literally poisoning himself from the inside, Dr. Nick explained. The waste backing up in his system was creating toxins that were affecting his heart, his brain, his entire body. But every time I tried to convince him to get proper treatment, Parker and the inner circle would shut me down. They said it would interfere with tour dates. The conspiracy deepened when Dr. Nick discovered that Elvis's condition had been deliberately hidden from other medical professionals. When specialists were consulted, they were given incomplete information and told to focus only on managing symptoms, not treating the underlying cause. I found out later that Parker had been paying off other doctors to keep quiet, Dr. Nick revealed. Anyone who might have spoken up about Elvis's real condition was either bought off or threatened. It was a complete medical conspiracy designed to keep Elvis performing, no matter what it cost his health. The morning of August 16th, Elvis was in agony. His abdomen was distended, his breathing was labored, and he was experiencing severe cardiac irregularities, all symptoms of advanced bowel obstruction. But instead of rushing him to a hospital, the decision was made to give him more medication to manage the pain. "I begged them to let me call an ambulance," Dr. Nick said, his voice heavy with regret. Elvis needed emergency surgery. His body was shutting down from the toxicity. But Parker said, absolutely not. He said it would ruin the upcoming tour and destroy Elvis's image if word got out that he needed bowel surgery. The cover-up began immediately after Elvis collapsed. While Dr. Nick was desperately trying to revive him, phone calls were being made to ensure the official story would focus on heart failure and drug use, anything except the truth about medical negligence and the deliberate concealment of a life-threatening condition. They had the story ready before the paramedics even arrived, Dr. Nick revealed. Heart attack brought on by prescription drug abuse. It was convenient, it was believable, and it protected everyone who had really killed Elvis through their greed and negligence. The pressure to stay silent intensified during the autopsy. Dr. Nick was told that if he contradicted the official findings, he would face criminal charges for overprescribing medications. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was being threatened with prosecution for the very drugs he'd been pressured to prescribe to manage Elvis's untreated condition. "They made me the fall guy while they covered up their own role in his death," Dr. Nick said. "I was damned if I spoke up and damned if I didn't. But I chose to protect Elvis's family from the truth, thinking I was doing the right thing." The conspiracy extended beyond just concealing the cause of death. According to Dr. Nick, records were altered, witness statements were coached, and key evidence was destroyed to maintain the official narrative. The goal wasn't just to protect Elvis's image, it was to protect the people who had prioritized profit over his life. Elvis died because the people around him cared more about money than medicine, Dr. Nick stated bluntly. They turned his body into a cash machine and ignored every warning sign until it was too late. Then they made sure the world would never know how they really killed him. This wasn't just medical malpractice. It was a calculated conspiracy that cost Elvis his life and destroyed everyone who tried to tell the truth. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about August 16, 1977. The official story? Elvis was found unconscious in his bathroom, rushed to the hospital, and pronounced dead. Heart failure. Drug overdose. Case closed. But the real story, the one they buried deeper than Elvis himself, begins with what Dr. George Nicopolis actually found when he first examined the body. Dr. Nick wasn't just Elvis's personal physician. He was there that day. He saw everything. And what he discovered in that bathroom wasn't just a man who had overdosed. It was a man who had been fighting a medical emergency that had been building for weeks. The megacolon condition was real. Elvis's colon had stretched to nearly twice its normal size, packed with over 4 months of impacted waste. But here's what they never told you. Elvis knew something was terribly wrong that morning. He'd been experiencing what medical professionals call autonomic dysreflexia, a condition where the body's nervous system goes into overdrive, trying to deal with severe bowel impaction. His blood pressure had been spiking dangerously for days. His heart was working overtime. The medication he'd taken wasn't for recreation. It was a desperate attempt to manage the pain and cramping that had become unbearable. Elvis wasn't getting high that morning. He was trying to survive. When Ginger Alden found him, Elvis was in the middle of what's called a defecation syncope, a massive drop in blood pressure that occurs when someone with severe constipation attempts to have a bowel movement. His body couldn't handle the strain. But here's the part that will shock you. Elvis was still alive when they found him. Dr. Nick arrived at Graceland before the ambulance. What he saw wasn't a peaceful death. Elvis was in severe respiratory distress. His lips were blue. His body was in full cardiac arrest, but not from drugs. The toxicology report that was released to the public, it was edited. The real report showed something entirely different. The actual cause of death wasn't polydrug intoxication. It was what medical examiners call sudden cardiac death, secondary to severe bowel impaction with autonomic nervous system failure. In simpler terms, Elvis's body shut down because his digestive system had become so backed up that it triggered a cascade of organ failures. But why cover this up? Why create an elaborate story about drug overdose? Because the truth was more embarrassing than anyone could handle. The king of rock and roll, the man who had conquered the world, had died trying to use the bathroom. The medical establishment, the Presley estate, and even Dr. Nick himself made a collective decision. Better to let the world think Elvis died of drug addiction than to reveal he died of something as... The cover-up went deeper than you can imagine. The hospital records were altered. The initial paramedic reports were rewritten. Even the funeral home was told to prepare the body in a way that would hide the physical evidence of the real cause of death. Elvis's abdomen was so distended from the impaction that they had to use special techniques to make him look normal in the casket. Dr. Nick carried this secret for decades. The guilt ate at him. He watched as Elvis's reputation was destroyed by stories of drug addiction, when the real story was about a man who had been suffering from a medical condition that could have been treated if anyone had taken it seriously. The prescription drugs found in Elvis's system, they were exactly what any doctor would prescribe for someone dealing with severe chronic constipation and the complications that come with it. The sedatives were for the pain. The stimulants were to try to get his digestive system moving. The opioids were for the cramping that had become constant. But the most shocking revelation came years later, when Dr. Nick finally decided to speak the truth. Elvis had been to see him just 2 days before his death. He'd begged for help with what he called the worst pain of his life. Dr. Nick had recommended immediate surgery to remove the impacted waste and repair the damaged colon. Elvis refused. He was scheduled to start a tour in 2 weeks. He couldn't afford to be out of commission. That decision cost him his life. If Elvis had agreed to the surgery, he would have survived. The medical emergency that killed him was completely preventable, but the culture of silence around bathroom issues, the embarrassment of admitting to such a problem, and the pressure to keep performing created a perfect storm. The real tragedy isn't that Elvis died. It's that he died unnecessarily, and then had his memory tarnished by a lie that was designed to protect everyone except him. The lie that was meant to protect Elvis's dignity ended up destroying everyone who tried to keep it alive. Dr. George Nicopolis thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was preserving the memory of his friend, his patient, the man he tried desperately to save. Instead, he created a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Within months of Elvis's death, Dr. Nick became the most hated man in America. The media painted him as the doctor who enabled Elvis's addiction, who fed him pills until he overdosed. Death threats poured in. His medical practice collapsed. Patients who had trusted him for years suddenly saw him as a killer. The Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners launched investigation after investigation, trying to prove he was criminally negligent. But here's what makes this even more tragic. Dr. Nick couldn't defend himself without revealing the truth. Every time he tried to explain that Elvis hadn't died from drug addiction, he was bound by the agreement he'd made with the Presley estate. Every time reporters asked him directly about the cause of death, he had to stick to the story that was destroying his reputation. The guilt consumed him. Friends who knew Dr. Nick before Elvis's death say he became a completely different person. He would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced he could have done more. He second-guessed every decision he'd made that day. Should he have forced Elvis to have the surgery? Should he have refused to prescribe the medications? Should he have broken patient confidentiality and told the family about the severity of the condition? The truth is, Dr. Nick had been fighting a losing battle for months. Elvis's inner circle knew about the constipation problem, but they treated it like a joke. They called it Elvis's little bathroom issues. They had no idea they were watching a man slowly die from a condition that kills thousands of people every year, mostly in silence, mostly in shame. The cover-up extended far beyond just changing the cause of death. Insurance companies had to be convinced to pay out life insurance policies based on the false narrative. The touring company had to be told a story that would protect them from lawsuits. Even Elvis's own family was kept in the dark about some of the details because the truth was considered too embarrassing to share. As the years passed, Dr. Nick watched as Elvis's legacy became defined by addiction and excess. Books were written about Elvis the drug addict. Movies portrayed him as a man who couldn't control his habits. The real Elvis, the man who had been suffering from a medical condition, who had been in genuine pain, who had died trying to get relief, was lost in a narrative that painted him as weak and self-destructive. The breaking point came in 1995, when Dr. Nick finally decided he couldn't carry the lie anymore. In a series of interviews that were largely ignored by the mainstream media, he tried to tell the truth. He explained the real cause of death. He showed medical records that proved Elvis hadn't died from drug addiction. But by then, the false narrative had become so entrenched that people didn't want to hear the truth. Dr. Nick's final years were spent trying to rehabilitate not just Elvis's memory, but his own. He would tell anyone who would listen that he had been a good doctor, that he had tried to save his patient, that the story everyone believed was a lie created to protect a dead man's dignity. But the damage was done. To most of the world, Dr. Nick would always be the doctor who killed Elvis. When Dr. Nick died in 2016, his last words to his family were reportedly an apology. Not for anything he had done wrong, but for the lie he had helped create. He begged his children to continue telling the truth about what really happened that day in 1977. This story isn't just about Elvis. It's about how celebrity deaths get rewritten to fit narratives that serve everyone, except the truth. It's about how shame around medical conditions, especially ones involving bodily functions, can literally kill people. And it's about how sometimes the people who try to protect us end up destroying themselves in the process. The real tragedy isn't that Elvis died. It's that he died unnecessarily, and then had his memory and his doctor's life destroyed by a lie that was supposed to protect them both. If this revelation about Elvis's real cause of death shocked you, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell, because we're uncovering more celebrity death cover-ups that will blow your mind. Drop a comment. Do you think Dr. Nick waited too long to tell the truth?